This is some good news for real estate owners and investors. Really, it's good news for everybody um, that owns property of any type or has property of any type because it deals with excessive fines. And what we have is that the United States Supreme Court just came down with an important decision dealing with excessive fines. And you might normally not think that, hey, this is an excessive fines, but what's happening around the country everywhere is that taxes are somewhat limited, and in Indiana, property taxes are capped in different ways and different things. So government's always looking for ways to get around that and raise revenue. So what they do is, of course, they raise money by fees, fines, taxes, assessments, all these different things. And the Supreme Court said, well, there's limitations on that. And the limitation is found in the Eighth Amendment, which is the Bill of Rights, right? The first thing that our founders did when they ratified the Constitution was they had the Bill of Rights. And you got like the First Amendment, everybody knows about free speech and religious liberty and that kind of thing. The Eighth Amendment deals with excessive fines, cruel and unusual punishments, those kind of things. And normally the Eighth Amendment is for federal law, but after the Civil War, what happened in our American jurisprudence is that we had the 14th Amendment. And the 14th Amendment started saying everything that's a federal law now applies to the states as far as the Constitution. And so it started unifying all of our law, all of our protections. And so the Eighth Amendment became applicable to all the states, including Indiana, under the 14th Amendment due process clause. So that's a lot of legal mumbo jumbo maybe, but it is important because that's what the Supreme Court did, was look at the historical aspect of it. And Indiana had an interesting situation. This is where it came up. So a guy gets arrested, he gets convicted of some kind of a drug case, and the penalty for the drug case had a maximum fine of $10,000. And what the state of Indiana did then was hire a private law firm to sue and recover his Land Rover, some kind of SUV that was valued at $42,000. And even though he bought it with money explicitly from an insurance policy from his father, the state argued that, hey, this Land Rover, this car, was used to perpetuate the crimes, or it was used to transport drugs at various moments in its use, even though it would have had normal, valid uses at all times. But because it had a part in the criminal process, they said, we're going to civilly, not criminally, civilly attach that Land Rover. We're going to seize it and take it from you. And there's a lot of seizure actions all over the country. Law enforcement is using this as a way to raise money, and anything that deals with the drug crime particularly, they're trying to say, hey, we're going to cast a big net around anything that you might own, houses, stocks, bonds, bank accounts, cars, anything, and we'll say, hey, your lifestyle is really part of the crime as well. The United States Supreme Court said this is not the law. You can't do that. And Indiana tried to use a special legal term. It's called in rem. In rem means against a thing rather than against a person. So lawsuits are normally in personam, that's Latin for against a person, and not against their property in rem. And so Indiana argued before the Supreme Court that, how do I say this, that the Eighth Amendment did not apply to a civil in rem action, right? So they're saying this is just a civil fine. It's not a normal excessive crime or excessive punishment, cruel and unusual punishment. It's not part of that sort of criminal idea. And the Supreme Court went all the way back to the year 1215, right, in Old England, 1215. So 800 years ago, Magna Carta, the Great Charter that began all of the and started to codify all of the English common law, the rights of people in England, that then became part of our process here in America and in other countries and in every state adopted laws. So they went back 800 years and said, look at this. Excessive fines were addressed back in Magna Carta. And then they came forward and looked at all the states at the time of the ratification of the Constitution, and then at the time of the Civil War, and even today, right? All these different states have no excessive fines as being a improper government overreach. And so they said, no, Indiana, you can't call it NREM. You can't just say it doesn't apply because it's not a specific part of the actual Eighth Amendment language. We can't carve it out. Excessive fines are part of overreaching. And even back in the 1200s, these kind of things were done for political purposes. They were as part of the slavery movement right after the Civil War. Some of the states in the South tried to have these excessive fines to take slaves back into slavery because they'd fine them so much and put them in prison that it was the same as being involuntary servitude. So the Supreme Court said, no, these excessive fines are not possible. They are prohibited against the states. They are guaranteed part of our rights under the United States Constitution, Eighth Amendment. And that's good news for everybody in every context of life, that the government cannot issue these excessive fines against you. And where this comes up, sort of the hot button, is the landlord registration and the excessive fines that are being assessed against landlords in the inspection process. So two different things there. You're going to hear more about that from us. But you've got inspections are one thing that the cities are doing and the states are doing, and registration. So we just had the Indiana Supreme Court say you can't have these excessive fees to register as a real estate investor. Now it's going to go back over to the inspections that are being done and the fines and penalties that are being assessed. And we've got this very powerful United States Supreme Court case that says you cannot have excessive fines and excessive penalties that are disproportionate to the problem. That's the key issue. So good news, Supreme Court, we love you. We're thankful you're there guarding our freedoms, and be alert to that. So look for more on this issue. We're very happy to bring it to you. Call us if you got questions. That's it for today. Thank you.